Kind of thinking about the question after Pentecost, how am I serving unity in the church? I think when, I kind of shared this yesterday too, when my experience of when the head and the body are not in sync with one another, of course that always leads to division. And I think when there's division, there's a sense of desolation in our own hearts. In the last couple of weeks, I've just been praying, through the Ignatian, just a certain spirits. This really hit me as the sixth rule in particular. Although in desolation, we should not change our first proposal, and our first proposal is our relationship with Jesus Christ. We keep our eyes focused on Christ as the center of who we are, word and sacrament, source to summit. It really helps us to really let our hearts be drawn by Christ. And then it says it's very, very advantageous to change ourselves. And sometimes when there's division, it's easy to point the finger at someone else. They're the reason that there's no unity. It's their agenda, rather than really looking at ourselves. So it's advantageous to change ourselves intensely against the desolation itself by insisting more upon prayer, meditation, upon examination, upon extending ourselves in a suitable way of doing penance. And so I think this is just a good reminder to us as disciples of Christ when we're seeking this sense of unity, even this Lenten season, praying Reconciliation Prayer 1 and Reconciliation Prayer 2 in the Roman Missal. If you just listen to the prayers itself, it talks about no division. It talks that there be nothing that estranges us from one another in Christ. And so the prayers at Mass are all about unity and not division. And sometimes that division happens when we fail to look at ourselves first and we look at the other as the problem. And so maybe it's just an observation that when we find that happening in our own hearts, may we be drawn to more prayer, more meditation, and we ourselves do penance, which leads to unity of heart.
Joyce, I'm Joni Osmus, and the parish that I belong to is Our Lady of the Black Hills. But something that has really hit me these 2 days is that I also belong to the Diocese of Rapid City. And in our group, sorry, I don't know what I'm doing this for, I have microphones. But in our group, something, an observation came about the beauty of the Chrism Mass last night. And something, just everybody praying together and experiencing the Eucharist. It was gorgeous. And personally, I'm going to think about an attitude of gratitude and counting my blessings every time I have a gripe with somebody else. I'll try to do that. That's been my Lenten resolve, and I've fallen quite a few times. But the comfort is Jesus fell 3 times too, and he just kept getting up. So, thank you.
As I was reflecting on Pentecost and Father being from another country, this one touched my heart. See, how am I the messenger of the good news of the gospel, an agent of unity in my parish and diocese? By my experience, it's like Father Mark says, if there is something that you're planning to do, I have to pray and how the Lord is calling me to, by my action, not by my words, but by my actions, how am I going to reflect the gospel, what the Lord wants through me, pass it to others in any event or something. And then for me, is by prayer, by inclusive, and to see each other, not just as a one culture, but as one holy Catholic Church. The unity is manifested by the unity. So every Sunday or every event can be a Pentecost, but not a Pentecost like the Tower of Babel, to which was the opposite. I really like the comments about unity and participation through collaboration. Because sometimes when we participate, just me, and I want to do this and this and that, it brings chaos and confusion and division. But when we participate through collaboration, in which each one of us that are going to be involved, have to sacrifice the little of myself for the common good and one opinion for the rest of our brothers and sisters. And they said participation without collaboration brings divisions. But participation with collaboration brings unity, harmony. And that's when I feel that we can manifest, the Pentecost in every Sunday, in everything that we do as a parish, as a diocese, is by invite the strangers, in every action, participate, bringing them the resources, or how can I, who can speak Spanish, who can speak Filipino, but identify, from our brothers and sisters, the reach, or who can help us. So in everything that we do, is be in unity, and harmony. And that's what I think it can be not only the Pentecost in every action, but the Pentecost of our one holy Catholic Church. To be in everything.
I'm very good at blowing up the ideas, but I'm going to sing it anyway. In our very last conversation, we ended with, from now through the end of the Lenten season, and during the Triduum, we also were discussing at the very least, are fervently going to offer up our green sign of unity, our beloved Bishop in prayer. Anybody else on board with that?
That's good. That's a lot of good comments. Sounds good. You're going to get over to.
I'm going to kick it. I had a chance to visit with Father Lachowitzer last night. I just wanted to learn a few more little tidbits about his life, because I know we don't think I share. And I also Googled you. You didn't have to Google anything. I just Googled you. But I was really struck by the fact that his background is in secondary education, and so a teacher to begin with. So that's probably where all this patience and wisdom came from, dealing with high school and middle school kids. And then another thing he shared was previous to that, his work with a logging company.
40 years ago.
40 years ago, I'll tell them that. No medal, no bedside. But Father was the one, after they would fell a tree, he would shimmy across, put the chain around, and then while we refer to it as the yarder, would pick it up and move it. So
Sparkly.
So he was in the logging business back in Washington. So it's just a good image for me. Just as a jack of all trades, logger, teacher, vicar.
If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. I was a choker setter, for those who are knowing of all the different logging crew titles. No, I don't use a chainsaw. I saw what they do. And that was just to the trees. You know, you've been thanking everybody, so Dory and Father, I just wanted to thank both of you for being masters of ceremony, but also just for the levity you bring, and also, Father, an incredible, succinct summary. You could have given this conference in 10 minutes and the people wouldn't have suffered anything. So thank you both. When I was around 7 years old, my family took a 3-hour road trip north to Lake Superior. My dad wanted to tour one of those huge iron ore ships that was in the Duluth Harbor. While my mother went off with my younger sisters to buy tickets for the tour, my dad and I stood on the pier looking up at the ship's deck and listening to a tour already underway. Now, this was almost 60 years ago, and there were no railings or ropes on the pier. The tour leader's voice way above our head said that the harbor was over 50 feet deep to accommodate the ships. I stared at the water just off the edge of the pier and said to my dad, 50 feet deep. So he picked me up and pretended to throw me into the lake. I panicked. I had a meltdown. Parents practice on their oldest child and get it right with the rest of them. The tour director stopped talking. My mother, recognizing the sound of her son's distress, left the line where she was supposed to get tickets and hurried away with my sisters to my rescue. My dad hunkered down eyeball to eyeball and said to me with an edge of panic in his voice, "What are you afraid of? You can swim." But it's 50 feet deep. Oh, for crying out loud, my father now whispered. Once the water is over your head, it doesn't matter how deep it is. It just matters that you can swim. We never did tour the ore boat that day. But my father's wisdom has stayed with me throughout my life, especially as pastor, and most especially as Vicar General. Yes, we can be in deep waters, but does it matter whether it's 8 feet deep or 800 feet deep? Once the water is over our head, it just matters that we can swim. And grace flows. We are in deep waters, my sisters and brothers, and yes, by the grace of God, we do swim. We are in a lot of different seas. Few are calm, few are serene. If there's a calm and serene one, please let me know, and I will begin my incarnation process. But we are in well-built boats. To change metaphors, some say life is a roller coaster. Many of us have heard that. I don't like that phrase. The thrill of a roller coaster is going down, and that's not life. I like to say life is like a sea. There are crests and there are troughs. When the ship is heading up to the crest, it will go down to the trough. And when down in the trough, it will come back up to the crest, and it will repeat that in a cycle of sailing over and over again. One thing we keep in mind, whether the bow is going up or down, the ship is never any deeper in the sea. The depth of the sea is not just in our duties and responsibilities. Some of that depth is dealing with ourselves. I really appreciated Father Mark McCormick's call to the inner life of conversion first when looking at any and all issues that divide us. And so, like many of you, I too struggle with balancing a doing life with a prayer life. I deal in the healthiest way I can with unhealthy habits, such as diet, amount of sleep, my addiction now down to 3 C's, cigarettes, caffeine, and crossword puzzles. I worry about finances. I dread tough personnel decisions. I too have opinions on where the church is and where it should be, all the while seeking patience with where we are. We all have stories of hatch, match, and dispatch. That's a priest's job description of baptisms, weddings, and funerals. But for all of us, we have experiences in those key family sacraments where the broader community gathers and we find ourselves in a pew, being the only ones saying the prayers in response to the parts of the Mass. We know confessions, anointings of the sick, and confirmations, where sometimes the virtue of hope becomes finger-crossed prayer, that those confirmandi go out in the world and stay part of us. We are good at getting to church for the sacraments, but we also ask ourselves, are we good at building a community of faith that is part of building the greater church? We all have differing priorities, but it's hard to be fussing about how much beeswax there is in the candles when the steeple is falling down. They are the ever-blowing 4 winds. Only one of us, only one of them is us, leadership. And we do have those killer bees. And we most visibly do share in the same original sin that has us all, without exception, living out our discipleship as imperfect people in an imperfect world. And yes, and boy did I experience this over the last couple days, and so did you with me, we can be real characters. But our differences need not divide us. In the words of some of my friends in law enforcement, they call me an aged beat cop who never took the sergeant's exam. When I look at divisions in the church, I realize that sometimes the division is in me. When it comes to the church's social teachings, I might be considered a liberal. When it comes to the authority of magisterial teachings, I might be considered a conservative, sometimes an ultra-conservative. I guess that's why on my day off, my favorite color is plaid. On the outside, a priest's day job clothes are black suits, black socks, black pants, and a little piece of white. But for priests as well as for lay leadership in the 21st century, there is one thing we cannot be: monochromatic in a technicolor world. There is in the Catholic Church a unique span which can include any part of any continuum anyone wants to draw, both in the people and in the priests. We have always been a people of all colors, from all nations. And for we people of colors, whether we wear cassocks or 501 relaxed fit, stole on the inside or stole on the outside, classic chasubles or those cloth tents from the 70s, whatever they are, with whatever designs are on them. Did you find one? Whether we are reformers, counter-reformers, or bridges in between, these differences do not have the power to divide us unless we, through the sin of wrath, by getting angry, give division its power. When sin wins, that's blasphemy. That's giving some other power a greater power than God. If we let sin win, we have lost. Fortunately, it was a long, long time ago when priests in my position could burn you at the stake for blasphemy. Unfortunately, today, we burn ourselves up with our own fires of wrath. This happens when we give sin a greater power than God's love in us through Jesus Christ. Sometimes we can be angry with past pastors or have anxiety about tomorrow's pastors. Pastors ourselves, sometimes one of the grieving parts of leaving a parish is we don't know what we're going to find. Some say reformers ruined the church. Some say the counter-reformers have turned back the clock. What is true is that reform keeps the ship intact when sailing the seas of political, economic, and social changes. What is true is that orthodoxy provides all the charts, compasses, telescopes, and the watchful eyes in the top of the mast that are needed to keep us on course even in the fog of reform. When St. John the 23rd opened that window to let in some fresh air, few could see that a cyclone of social change in the United States of America would blow out that window. Unity today among the priests and among the people is in contrast to a divided nation and world. Whenever among us there is an us and a them, it is the powers of this world that wag the ecclesial dog. Orthodoxy serves unity. Necessary reform serves unity. It is a renaissance in the church when they are inseparable and dependent on one another. As I mentioned in my first conference, in the 17th chapter of the Gospel of John, in the prayer of Jesus, we note that Jesus prayed that we may be all one. What we are to note further is that our Lord did not pray that we may be all right, or that we may be all the same. Jesus prayed that we may be all one. Our unity is in answer to our Lord's prayer, and is evidence of the workings of the Holy Spirit, for truly on our own we are hopelessly and helplessly divided. But what an amazing power of the Holy Spirit that elevates us above what is all too human, so that we can glimpse the all too divine in our oneness, in our unity. Our unity as the Catholic Church is our gift to the divided world, and we are far more united than we might think, in here and out there. For all of us today, indeed, we are united in the sacramental life of the Church. We personally experience and share the presence of the risen Christ through the sacraments we are privileged to receive. This is the foundation of a joy that nothing in this world can give us and nothing in this world can take away from us. We share together both the profound grace of the Holy Spirit working through our baptism and confirmation, and the burden of our responsibilities, especially when we are disappointed with ourselves. I like to use me as an example when it comes to being disappointed. I know those times in emergencies and tragedies when I'm right there and made the time to minister to families and communities. And I know all too well the guilt from a missed phone call, unattended email, busy schedule, or whatever other reasons there may have been for the times that I wasn't available, didn't know, or didn't understand. I know the stress of too many things to do, question my priorities, grumble about the never-ending demands on a calendar that seems to order me around. As a pastor, I loved where I was, and each time I missed where I was. I tried not to be a C&E brother to my siblings, that's Christmas and Easter, and count on my friends to remind me that who I am is not just what my current title is. Yes, there have been and continue to be days when I am in waters way over my head. And there are times I feel like a 15th century sailing captain trying to figure out the high-tech instruments on a multi-million-dollar yacht. Our common lives as disciples is a unity in unique experiences that are foundational for us as Catholics. We come from the world and we live out our lives in the world. And by our baptisms, we know we are not of the world. So our view of church, self, and the world is to see as Christ sees, to look through the very eyes of Jesus back at us, to see what Jesus sees. With compassion, we are to see the best in all God's children, from the unborn to the unloved. But it's hard to be compassionate in the torrent of ill-informed dissent and unjust public attacks. I know the frustration with today's media that tries to force Catholics into divided categories: orthodoxy, dissent, conservative, liberal, traditionalist, progressives. I know the challenge in today's church to live out the faith in that intersection of authoritative teachings and my personal faith life. And we all know the intersection of the sacred and the secular, the immanent and the transcendent, the body politic and the body mystical, magisterial teachings and pastoral practices. To put it into a more lofty, philosophical and theological way, I was listening last night to Real Present Radio on the philosophy of St. Augustine and talking about putting an oar in the water and the image of the oar bent, but the oar wasn't bent, it was just our perception, and I was taking notes. But there is, when we include all of this, the both and the and, if you will, together, that wonderful word by the philosopher Plato called metapsy. It's Greek, just means in between. It's the in-between also that Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas used. It's the in-between, the heaven not yet, which we know all painfully too well, and the heaven already here, where we get that glimpse and find the source of our joy. The union of the all too human and the all too divine is as inseparable as our dual nature. Our mystical worlds will never be without a temporal reality. Pastors can never be a good pastor without being good at administration. And for pastors who say, don't turn me into an MBA, I like to say there are always MBAs in the pews. If not current, retired. Good administration, administration is for the good of the church. It is hopefully in the service of unity among you, with your bishop, with the people you serve, that I have focused these talks and your discussions on the structure in parish and diocesan life needed to connect head and body, connect parishes as the body of the local church with its apostolic head as your bishop. In sharing in the work of the implementation of the diocesan priority plan, you are sharing in the opportunity to connect the people to mission and to maintain our focus in an attention deficit world. And yes, there is that great shadow darkening any vision for a church of mission. And now my 6th year as Vicar General and moderator of the Curia, it's kind of what means Chief of Staff for the Archdiocese, I've stared under the microscope to examine pathological diseases in the priesthood. I have been in the files. Some of those contents and stories will never leave my mind. And so it wearies my heart. And I daydream about a sabbatical and going back to parish work, this time in a small parish with no money issues and perfect people. And then I have one big problem. I'm not perfect. I've also witnessed everyday miracles in the tsunami of scandal. I am still humbled and amazed by the people that suddenly and coincidentally appeared as the right person at the right time. I have witnessed how the darker the Advent, the brighter the Christmas. I never really knew how big the cross of Jesus Christ truly is until I glimpsed hell. My stories are not the horror stories that grieved my heart with 400 people suing the church. My stories are the stories of joy, the healing that has come about through individual meetings with survivors and their families. My joy is the privilege to have been part of a crew that has sailed our diocesan ship through the stormiest seas imaginable, and then watched it be dry docked for repair. It's called U.S. Bankruptcy Court. And we sold everything. And there was something Jesus about emptying our pockets. There was something Jesus about getting on the side of those who have been most harmed. There was something Jesus about a commitment to put victims first and to work on reconciliation and reparation as the path to justice on their behalf. So today, for our diocesan ship, the anchor is pulled up and the ropes are untied, and once again we are out to sea. The water seems slightly calmer. Archbishop Bernard Hebda said, "We can smell land, but we can't see it yet." We await a synod, out of which we will have our diocesan pastoral plan. I saw the synod schedule. Our plan is 2 years away. So, did I say it before? Oh, I envy your diocesan plan. Don't take it for granted. It takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of the Holy Spirit given a gift to be a vision for the church. I have surprisingly great joy in being a priest. I go to bed every night grateful to God for this gift that on my own I probably did everything I could to walk away from it. I have great joy in the maturity that comes with age. I wouldn't trade this brain for any other time in my life, though I obtained my body just 10 years ago. And I see that joy in you. And I commend you for what I see. And I offer this final conference to look at unity, the oneness that is the first mark of the church. As one Catholic holy, and apostolic. Much has been written, and much will be said about the health, holiness, and happiness in today's Catholic priests. Much has been written and will be said about the state of the Catholic Church in the United States and around the world. No matter where or how people live, whether the elderly or the youth, rich or poor, villager or city dweller, on the farm or in the cul-de-sac, the technological revolution has brought the world to our pockets. The horrific scandal of priests abusing children is made even more shocking, if that is possible, by the numbers. Nationwide, the number of victims is exponentially expanded by the numbers of their families, friends, and advocates. And for us, the number of priest abusers is humiliating and demoralizing. It is not a matter of when the next shoe will drop. It is the realization that it will continue to be for some time Lady Gaga's shoe closet. There are other countries who have yet to come to the awareness of the need to protect the environments for our children. And the only way forward is through transparency and disclosure. My admiration to Bishop Bruce and Bishop Schwein for doing the tough task of disclosing priest abusers. That is not easy. It's not easy on the priests, it's not easy on the people. And it doesn't matter where the crisis is. In St. Paul, we thought we had our house together. I went outside to get a breath of fresh air and the neighborhood was on fire. That was the Pennsylvania grand jury report. But yet, as we cooperate with whatever civil processes are just, we can learn lessons from other dioceses. We learn these lessons as the broader church so that we don't need the courts to order us to do what we already know is the moral and right thing to do. We are already given the Spirit and the gift of wisdom and right judgment to do what's right. We now know that we can win the legal battle and lose the church because we get on the wrong side of those who have been voiceless. And even though attorneys, God bless them, I have a great admiration for lawyers, but even though attorneys work for the church, the nature of civil justice is that the church loses when we wound and further traumatize victims in a courtroom battle. Behind this wall of attorneys, the church can be blind to the complicated and sophisticated civil laws, processes, and procedures. I can say here, but it's not time yet to say it publicly, the voice of the church is often gagged by individual rights of privacy. And then there is the deafness that comes from attorney-client privileges. The virtue of justice, my sisters and brothers, compels us to remove the blindfold and see the injustice. It is not just about the victims of clerical sexual abuse. Now that those eyes have been opened so painfully, we need to look at where the injustices are within our own communities and not be blind to those, to not be afraid of the pain, to offer as our sacrifice a grieving heart and a disturbed conscience wherever we see injustice. We are to open our ears to the cries of those most in need of healing and take that iconic scale of civil justice and put the foot of Jesus on one side of it to tip the scales in favor of the powerless. From the unborn to the unloved, for those who have worked their whole lives to bring awareness as the path to justice and feel frustrated when we go 2 steps backwards. It must be acknowledged with great pain that it took the civil justice system and public media to shine a spotlight on this darkness in the church. They are not to blame, and they are not our biggest problem. I said before, we are called to make saints, not demons. Father Mark said it. Every time we're blaming somebody outside of ourselves, it just furthers division. When we look inside of ourselves to find healing in the path to unity, there we build each other up. Action and accountability are needed so that we restore trust and continue to be a church, a visible witness of reconciliation, reparation, and yes, restoration. The light and love of Jesus Christ is a far greater power than the darkness of the world, especially in sin and the forces of evil. Healing is not amnesia, any more than forgiveness is forgetting. We can learn from our sisters and brothers who are Jewish what it takes to look at healing in a community, and it's the opposite of forgetting. It is never forget. Yes, it's a painful awareness, but it points to our own need in our own lives for reconciliation and that turning to Jesus for healing. That trust in the mercy of Jesus. Only through the real presence of the risen Christ do we experience that power as a church to overcome sin, to be made whole, and be transformed by the Holy Spirit to be the people, individually and as one body, that God created us to be. It is our destiny. Hope is not some finger-crossed wish upon a Bethlehem star that this abuse stuff will all go away. Judge Yeski from the Wisconsin Supreme Court, practicing Catholic, addressed our chancery staff and priests of our diocese. And her words to us still rattle me, because she said, we're never going to get over this, so get over it. Awareness, again, is a painful process, but the virtue of hope, not wishful thinking, the virtue of hope reassures us that just as God has done in the past, God is doing today, and God will do forevermore, for every day to come. Already we are a better, healthier, and holier church. Yes, we do experience humiliation and debasement when today's understanding and awareness judges yesterday's history. But nonetheless, the Holy Spirit opens the eyes, ears, and minds and the voice of the church to be advocates for the safety of all God's children and to be models of a path to healing and reconciliation and restoration. Part of providing safe environments for our children includes what we all say around our children about the church as though it's not us. That church. The church. Anytime we put the church outside of us, we have stepped outside of the church. We don't intend that. So we watch our words and what we say about the church. It can frustrate us that too many of the faithful are illiterate when it comes to the teachings of the church, and too secular in their choices and media-hyped opinions. Yes, after a generation of inconsistent catechesis, it's useless for us to keep complaining about others, but we call it the church. Let us not talk about the church as other than us. Let us not separate out its institution, separate out its budget. Whatever way we can to work for unity, it begins as simple as what we say around our children about the church we are so privileged and blessed to be a part of. It can be whack-a-mole, and we can deny the gospel if we are always messengers about what is wrong with everyone else. And besides, the children are listening. And they are listening more than any other generation in my lifetime. And for all of us who work with the youth, we know what they're looking for. They're looking for good news. They're looking for a sense of hope. They're looking for light in darkness. They're looking for truth in a world of lies. My goodness gracious sakes alive, how do we proclaim the joyful hope in the resurrection when in our speech we can't even rise above our own sins?